Do you think she's crying into her pillow, torn apart by guilt? Do you imagine her conscience torturing her every second after what she's done? That is the biggest and most dangerous male illusion. The brutal truth is that, most likely, in the first hours, days, and even weeks after the infidelity, she doesn't feel remorse. She feels euphoria. It's an intoxicating sensation of power, of her own irresistibility, and of absolute control over her life. While you are processing the betrayal, she is experiencing one of the most powerful emotional highs of her life. And today, we are not here to judge or justify. We will dissect this phenomenon like surgeons. We will break down the biochemical cocktail and the psychological triggers that turn betrayal into a source of incredible strength. We'll bring in the heavy artillery in the form of Freud and Jung to peer into the darkest corners of her subconscious. This analysis is not meant to excuse her. It's meant for you to understand what you're really dealing with, so that you stop taking her temporary madness at face value and avoid making fatal mistakes based on illusions. What you learn today will give you a steel-like composure and a clear vision of the situation when a storm of someone else's emotions is raging around you. But before we begin this deep dive, I must warn you, if you only watch until the middle, you will only get half the truth. I will reveal the most important key at the very end. Therefore, before we start, I ask you to give this video a like right now. And if you're here for the first time and are ready to go all the way for real, knowledge, subscribe right now. And before we begin, I'm very curious about our geography. Please write in the comments what city you're from. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Betrayal Euphoria. What is really happening in her head in BOD. To understand her state, we must discard the concepts of good and bad and look at the situation like scientists. Her euphoria isn't a sign of heartlessness, but a predictable result of powerful processes that we will now divide into two key aspects: biochemical and psychological. The biochemical cocktail, a dopamine explosion. Let's start with the foundation, with what cannot be faked or imitated: the chemistry of her body. The moment she crosses the line, her brain turns into a veritable drug lab operating at full capacity. Imagine three key components mixing into one potent, addictive cocktail. The first and main component is dopamine. Everyone has heard the word, but few understand its true mechanics. Dopamine is not the happiness hormone. It's the neurotransmitter of anticipation and motivation. It's released not from possessing the reward itself, but from the chase. And infidelity is the perfect dopamine quest. It all starts long before the act itself, the secret suggestive messages. Planning the meeting, which feels like a spy operation. Choosing an outfit, buying new lingerie. Each of these steps is a microdose of dopamine. The brain literally applauds her for her audacity and resourcefulness, delivering portion after portion of this internal drug. The novelty and risk themselves are powerful catalysts. Neuroscientists call this the novelty bonus. Anything new and unexplored forces the mesolimbic pathway in the brain, our dopamine conveyor belt, to work in overdrive. Therefore, she is drawn to the new partner, not because he is objectively better than you, but because he is new. He is uncharted territory, and for exploring it, the brain pays generously with dopamine. The second component is the duo of adrenaline and norepinephrine. These are the hormones of the fight or flight stress response. It would seem that the fear of being caught should cause agony, but in this context, it acts as a powerful stimulant. The heart pounds, breathing quickens, palms sweat. This is not agony. This is life at maximum concentration. The gray routine, the Groundhog Day that may have been suffocating her for years, vanishes without a trace. Instead, there's a sharp, piercing feeling of the here and now. The world around her becomes hyper-realistic. Colors are brighter, sounds are louder, touches are sharper. It's like watching a black and white movie your whole life and suddenly seeing it in color. Adrenaline burns the bridges to the past and future, leaving her only in the intoxicating present moment. It's a chemical escape from boredom into a world of ultimate intensity. And the third component, the cherry on this poisonous cake, is endorphins. These are our body's natural opiates, internally produced morphine. They are released in response to intense stress and physical intimacy. When the peak of the adrenaline storm passes, it is the endorphins that provide a feeling of deep relaxation, tranquility, and a light, blissful euphoria. They seem to tell her, "You did it. You went through the risk and got the reward. Now you can rest." Thus, her brain, without her conscious involvement, creates a perfect narcotic cycle. Dopamine anticipation pushes her to take the risk. Adrenaline helps her survive that risk in a state of intense high. And endorphins reinforce the positive experience, creating a desire to repeat it. It is a perfect biochemical trap. It is precisely here that Sigmund Freud's theory, explained in simple terms, becomes a crystal clear explanation. In essence, Freud spoke of an eternal war within each of us. A war between two forces. The first force is our inner primitive beast that craves immediate pleasure and operates on the "I want it," here and now principle. It doesn't care about consequences, morality, or the feelings of others. The second force is our inner guardian, our conscience, our sense of duty, all the shoulds and musts absorbed since childhood. The biochemical storm we've described acts as a deafening megaphone for the voice of "I want." It amplifies it to such an extent that the quiet voice of conscience and duty first turns into a barely audible whisper, and then is completely drowned out. A temporary shutdown of the conscience occurs. She doesn't think about you and the family, not because she is heartless, but because the part of her psyche responsible for guilt and empathy is literally deafened and paralyzed by the roar of instincts, amplified by chemistry. She is in a state of affect, driven by a pure, animalistic thirst for immediate reward, the psychological triumph, reclaiming power and control. But chemistry, no matter how powerful, is only the fuel. The rocket is guided by psychology. And this psychological rocket is flying towards a single goal, the feeling of power and control. For a woman, infidelity is rarely just a physiological act. It is a symbolic gesture, a political declaration, a loud statement addressed primarily to herself. To understand its essence, you need to imagine in detail the context from which she is breaking free. Picture a woman, let's call her Anna. For the last few years, her life has been a mechanism timed to the second. Wake up, get the kids ready for school, her husband for work, herself to work, and in the evening pick up the kids, homework, cooking, cleaning. The romance is gone. Conversations have been reduced to household matters. What to buy? Who will pick them up? She feels less like a woman and more like the manager of a family enterprise. Her personality, her desires, her sense of self as an attractive, spontaneous, vibrant woman have dissolved in the acid of routine. She is a function. And at this point of existential despair, someone appears who sees her not as a function, but as a woman. Someone who sends her exciting messages during the day, making her heart beat faster, right in the middle of a work meeting. Someone who gives her not practical gifts, but emotions. And that is when infidelity becomes for her an act not of betrayal, but of liberation. It is her personal revolution against the dictatorship of domesticity. It's a way to shatter the glass she was suffocating behind. Every secret message, every stolen meeting is not just a step towards another man. It is a step towards herself, towards the version of herself that she feels she has long lost. She feels not like a driven cog in the family machine, but as the main director of her own life. She wrote the script, she chose the actor, and she is enjoying the performance. This intoxicating feeling of control, which she lacked so much, completely overrides any thoughts of the consequences. She isn't destroying. In her worldview, she is creating her new, free self. And here we must turn to Freud's main rival, the great Carl Gustav Jung, and his concept of the shadow. The shadow, according to Jung, is our dark, repressed side. It is everything we hide from others and from ourselves, because society has taught us that it is bad. It is our egoism, our sexuality, our aggression, our thirst for freedom from obligations. Especially in women raised in a culture of being convenient, being a good mother and wife, this shadow sits for decades in the deep basement of the subconscious. But it does not sleep. It gathers strength, waiting for its moment. Infidelity is that very moment when the basement door is torn from its hinges and the shadow breaks free. All the suppressed fantasies, all the hidden irritation at routine, all the desire to be a bad girl, it all merges into one powerful, liberating act. And Jung highlighted a striking paradox. At the moment of reuniting with their shadow, a person for a short time feels not like a sinner, but on the contrary incredibly whole, because for the first time in their life, they have allowed themselves to be not half, but their entire self, both the light and the dark side at once. It's as if the modest Dr. Jekyll was not horrified by his transformation into Mr. Hyde, but instead felt elation at gaining his power and freedom. This illusion of wholeness, this fusion with the repressed part of oneself, is the psychological root of the euphoria. She has finally given herself permission to be bad. And that permission feels like the greatest victory. This is the level of depth you will find in every one of my videos. If this is the approach you've been looking for, now is the perfect time to subscribe. Chapter 2. The Inevitable Hangover When the Euphoria Fades and What Comes in EXT, but no drug lasts forever. No carnival goes on endlessly. The laws of physics and psychology are relentless. Every peak is followed by a valley. And the euphoria of betrayal is no exception. Sooner or later, the biochemical party in her brain ends, and the gray, damp morning of a brutal hangover arrives. And what happens next determines absolutely everything. The dopamine crash and the collision with reality. The first thing that happens is a purely physiological depletion of dopamine receptors. The brain, constantly bombarded with extreme doses of stimulants, begins to defend itself. It reduces its sensitivity. As a result, what caused a storm of delight yesterday now evokes only a faint shadow of emotion. The novelty wears off. Secret meetings transform from a thrilling adventure into just another routine, only more complicated and dangerous. To get the same high, an even greater dose of risk, novelty, and drama is needed. But the resource of novelty is finite. And when it is exhausted, the music stops. And in this deafening silence, as the chemical fog dissipates, she comes face to face with reality for the first time in a long while. Before, she was looking at the world through the distorting lens of euphoria. Now that lens is shattered. She sees not intoxicating freedom, but the real ugly consequences of her actions. She suddenly truly comprehends the pain she has caused you. She sees the real, not hypothetical, threat to her family, her home, the future of her children. She starts to think about what her parents, friends, and colleagues will say. She faces what is known as cognitive dissonance, a torturous conflict between two ideas in her head. I am a good person, and I have done a terrible thing. The psyche cannot endure this contradiction for long, and to get rid of it, she must do something. Imagine her state. She is sitting in her car after another meeting. The adrenaline has worn off. The endorphins are no longer working. Instead of warmth and peace, there is a cold, clammy anxiety. The feeling of omnipotence has evaporated, leaving behind a ringing emptiness and panic. The euphoria is gone, But the problems haven't just remained. They've grown to gigantic proportions. It is in this state of weakness, vulnerability, and fear that she will make her next move, the moment of truth. Two scenarios for the future in this state of withdrawal and collision with cold reality. The woman finds herself at a crossroads. And from here, there are only two paths. It is critically important for you to understand the logic of each one to avoid becoming a victim of manipulation, even if it's unconscious. Scenario 1, the most common, the return with remorse. Suddenly, she comes to you. She cries, says she made the biggest mistake of her life, that she was not herself, that she has realized everything and is willing to do anything to regain your trust. A man, seeing these tears, often takes them for sincere remorse. But in 9 out of 10 cases, this is not remorse for the pain caused to you. It is self-pity and an ice-cold fear of the consequences. She has suddenly realized that she could lose not just a husband, but her entire world, her home, financial stability, the status of a married woman, her comfortable life, her relationship with her children. Her remorse is an instinctive attempt to hit undo, to stuff the genie back into the bottle. It is not love for you that is speaking, but the fear of the unknown and the loss of resources. She is not trying to atone for her guilt, but to nullify a deal that turned out to be a bad one. And if you take this at face value, you risk letting not a repentant wife back into your home, but a frightened manipulator. Scenario 2. Rarer but final, the departure into a new life. In this case, the collision with reality has the opposite effect. Yes, the euphoria has passed, but like the first stage of a rocket, it has propelled her into a new orbit. It has made her realize that life can be different. And now, the contrast between that, albeit illusory, brightness and the grayness of your past relationship becomes unbearable for her. She understands that the bridges have been burned, and instead of running back in a panic, she decides to move forward into a new, albeit uncertain, life. In this case, she will use psychological defense mechanisms to justify her departure. She will start to rewrite the history of your relationship, remembering only the bad things. She will say things like, "It's not you, it's me. I just fell out of love with you. I need to find myself." Do not argue with her. It is useless. This is not a dialogue. It is her monologue, aimed at convincing herself that her destructive choice was the right one. Conclusion: a cool mind versus a hot HEARTs. So what is the main, practical takeaway from all this deep analysis? There is only one, and it must become your mantra, your life raft in this emotional storm. Never, under any circumstances, make any fateful decisions based on her current emotional state after the infidelity. Her emotions during this period are not a compass pointing to the truth. They are merely smoke from the fire in her soul, and this smoke constantly changes direction with the wind of her fears and desires. Understand, your main vulnerability is your own instincts. You instinctively expect remorse from her because in your worldview, wrongdoing should be followed by the punishment of a guilty conscience. And when you see her coldness or euphoria instead, your instinct screams, "She is a monster. She must be destroyed." And then, when she comes to you with a flood of tears, your instinct switches. She has realized everything. She is suffering. She must be saved and forgiven. Both of these instincts are traps. They force you to react to her state, thereby handing her complete control of the situation. Your task is to disable these instincts. Imagine she has a severe emotional fever. You don't argue with the fever. You don't take its word for it. You simply let it run its course, observing from a distance and bringing down the temperature with cool detachment. Your only saving strategy is the 3NO's strategy, taken to the absolute. First nitrogen monoxide to immediate decisions. Take a break. not for a day or two, for weeks, or better yet, for months. This time is not for her. It's for you to allow her chemical storm to completely subside and for your own not even to begin. Any decision made in the first few weeks will be dictated by pain, resentment, or false hope. It will be the wrong 1.2 no to emotional confrontations. This is critically important. When she is euphoric, any attempt to appeal to her conscience will be perceived as weakness and pressure, which will only reinforce her sense of being right. When her crash begins, and she comes to you in hysterics, any emotional reaction from you, be it anger or pity, will only feed her drama. Your only correct stance is that of a calm, detached observer. To all her emotional outbursts, there should be one answer. I'm not ready to discuss this until we have both calmed down. You must become a rock for her, against which her waves break, not a boat tossed about by those waves. And third, most importantly, nitrogen monoxide to taking her at her word. From the moment of betrayal, her words have lost all value. They have become merely a tool to achieve her immediate goals. First, to justify herself, then, to save herself from the consequences. From now on, only actions should exist for you. Not, I understand everything now, but concrete, measurable actions. A complete and verifiable severing of all contact with the other man. Voluntarily starting personal psychotherapy to understand the reasons for her actions. Absolute transparency in her behavior. And all of this, not for a week, but for many months. Only then can you distinguish genuine remorse from a panicked attempt to escape the consequences. Understand the main point. Your goal is not to save the family at all costs, nor is it to get revenge. Your main goal is to save yourself, to preserve your dignity, your self-esteem, and your right to make decisions based on reality, not on someone else's manipulations. You are dealing not with malice, but with a temporary madness caused by chemistry and psychology. And as with any madness, you cannot negotiate with it. You must protect yourself from it with distance and a cool mind. Give her and yourself time to come to your senses. And only then, looking at a sober, calm person, will you be able to decide who is truly in front of you and whether you have a future. This cold, almost clinical approach is the only way to protect your dignity and not let her temporary euphoria destroy your life completely. And now, the main question for you, based on everything we've discussed. Have you ever encountered a situation where, after an obvious betrayal, a person acted not guilty, but on the contrary confident and even defiant? It doesn't matter if it was in a relationship, a friendship, or at work. Write your story in the comments. The most telling examples will help thousands of others see this pattern and not fall into the trap.